Hello. I'm very excited to be here. My two favorite topics to talk about are women and leadership. So this panel feels very appropriate for my passion. Just want to say, we all know it's a very exciting and monumental time in the world right now for women. There's over 100 women who have been elected to the House of Representatives. Women are rising in ranks, and we are making really great progress. Just because we're making progress, it doesn't mean that we're done. And we have a long way to go, and there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot up in the air. Not just getting women in leadership positions, because that's important, but also changing the systems and the structures around to create a more supportive environment. I am thrilled and honored and very grateful to be alongside three courageous women who are leading change inside of their organization. I will start with Elizabeth O'Brien. Elizabeth is the Program Director of Worldwide Sports and Entertainment Sponsorship Marketing at IBM. She's responsible for helping IBM's partners elevate and amplify moments of cultural significance by manifesting innovation, including AI, cognitive technology, and cloud. She works with many iconic properties, including Masters, Wimbledon, US Open, ESPN, fantasy football, and others. Then I have Paige Winburn. Paige is VP and Global Head of Content Strategy at MetLife. Paige is responsible for leading global content strategy, including content marketing, SEO, SEM, social media, and global tone of voice. Prior to MetLife, Paige was the Executive Director and Head of Content at JPMorgan Chase and has over 20 years of experience in this space. And then next to me, I've got Monica Bertrán. Monica is the Global Head of Corporate and Employee Brand MultiMedia at Bloomberg. In her role, she has developed the company's first ever multimedia in-house agency, a creative team of producers, editors, and graphic designers that produce internal and external content that reaches over 16,000 employees globally. She drives overall video and content vision, as well as the strategic messaging for the corporate communications department. She has had a long-standing career in Bloomberg, driving some impressive change. Those are my notes. So I'd love to just start off. I've been thinking a lot about how we sort of frame this conversation. One is women who are leading change, and what does it mean to just drive innovation? Yes, we happen to be women sitting up here. And another, what is the unique challenges that it means being a woman in a corporate situation, in a leadership position, given our cultural context? So we're gonna play around with both of those today. Elizabeth, I'd love to start with you. You work in a heavily dominated male area industry, sports, esports, all of that. I'd love for you to talk a bit about what some of the things you guys are doing to drive the conversation for women.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start by talking about IBM a little bit. We have a CEO is a woman. And we've been long a proponent of diversity and inclusion, and those scores are getting better every year. Not that there's not still work to do. So, I feel proud to be part of an organization that has shown a commitment over time to including not only women, but just sort of a very diverse, workforce. So, what my challenge is to try to make IBM technology come to life through our sports and entertainment partnerships, right? So, what is the technology at the US Open, and, what does it mean that the US Open digital platforms run on the cloud, right? And, why would developers be interested in that cloud, right? And so it's, reaching out to an audience that's not just men, not just, it's reaching out to a diverse audience. And so, that's with sort of traditional sports. And we're looking at some new areas like esports, which, I've been in several rooms and I'm looking around going like, this is all guys in this room. And I found, pockets within esports where women are sort of ascendant. Yeah. And the challenge that I face is how do we sort of communicate with those women and nurture the interest of those women in the context of anything we would do with technology in that space.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Monica, we were talking earlier about this idea of disruptor. And I would love to hear a bit about when did you first know you were a disruptor, first of all, maybe childhood, and what are you doing to bring that philosophy and mentality really into the organization, Bloomberg?
Yeah. I probably wasn't a disruptor as a child, believe it or not. And I think I learned to be a disruptor because I entered the journalism world first. So I spent much of my early career in journalism and being a producer first and then a reporter. And then transitioning that entire skill set to say, okay, I want to stay at Bloomberg, but now what am I going to do here? And seeing an opportunity in developing that. So I think that I describe being a disruptor as the person who's always asking the questions, and that comes from the journalism background, right? I had to ask all these questions of CEOs and guests, talking about the markets and all that. So now I find myself in rooms and I'm still asking the questions. Now everybody doesn't like the questions that I ask, but I still find myself questioning, but why are you doing it that way? Did you look at it this way? Why aren't we talking to those people about how we can do it differently? So I think that that's kind of my definition of being a disruptor.
Yeah, and I think you just alluded to it a bit, but what are the questions? Is there a secret, always ask why? Or is there one that will always sort of help get to underneath the issue?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I guess I again approach, what I do now the way I approach journalism, which is I prepared. And I prepare.
Yeah.
So if I know that there's an issue or, we're approaching a project or whatever that is, I prepare before I go into that room. I prepare for whatever the meeting is, if it's a conversation, because I want to know all sides before I get there. And I will do the back work. I will understand the relationship and all that so that I understand what the angles are.
Yeah.
And then things then get revealed that way, right? I was in a meeting just today and we were talking about, a specific technology and that we were going to use. And I was a bit of a disruptor because I had brought in a vendor and I had them test out some technology. And another team in the building who hadn't talked to me about how they were proceeding, now all of a sudden they were upset because I had introduced a new technology. And I said from the beginning, we just want to get to the right technology. I don't care who, the vendor is, but so the conversation was around, we shouldn't be pushing technology. We should let this department, decide on the technology. And I was like, but you all have introduced technology already, and that's what you're pushing, right? You have the agenda, so which is it? So again, I think just doing that preparation and knowing the background of all that before I got into that meeting allowed me to ask the right questions to reveal that what they were saying was not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, I love that. It's background, do your work, and then also just question everything, making sure we're kind of coming at things for the right reasons. Yeah, beautiful. Paige, I'd love to hear a bit about, I know you're doing a lot internally in supporting, how do we not just support women, but how do we support more diverse ideas? One of my favorite quotes is by Doug Conant, to win in the marketplace, we must first win in the workplace. And I know you're doing a lot of work around culture, and so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of that work and what's been happening there.
Sure. So interesting. Both women on either side of me just raised thoughts that kind of feel like they connect to that. So I might try to thread some needles here. But it's very interesting to think about what makes a disruptor, what makes someone innovative. And I too thought about it, and I think it can answer this question. So for me, innovative means that you're always looking at problems, not as problems, but as challenges. And there's sort of intrinsic optimism with that approach, and a bit of empathy with that approach that there's not a problem we can't actually find a solution for. And I think innovation and my attraction has always been to startup kind of modes. So even at MetLife, I joined the company because it's in a transformation state right now. It's very exciting to see a 150-year-old brand look at everything with a fresh eye and ask those questions. And so one of the things that we've been really kind of digging under is, our own workforce, and how do we continue to evolve just like our customers are evolving? Like, all of us are living a very different life than maybe the generation before us did. And people that we work with, or they are our customers, they represent people from every type of background you can imagine. And so part of the sort of emphasis that I have in how I approach being a leader in a large organization is to make sure that we're hearing everybody's voices. There's a lot of, kind of traditional hierarchy that you hear a lot about in some companies, and I've just been so refreshed to see that MetLife doesn't want to stay there. There's a real thirst for how do we continue to evolve and innovate and disrupt ourselves in how we work. You talk a lot, every buzzword you can imagine, the matrixing, the breaking down silos, the collaboration. It's not just jargon, it actually changes the way we work. And so I think that's one way that I feel like innovation is coming to light for me.
Beautiful, thank you. That also gets me thinking about what we were talking about earlier, to this idea that in order to disrupt or innovate or change something, you have to stick your neck out, right, and take a challenge. I'd love to hear your perspective on sort of the risks and what it means to truly drive change, and how you would go about doing that.
Yeah. All the time. As a matter of fact, when we did our pre-call, I was in the middle of, I called it the tsunami that day. I think it's just, you have to be comfortable, and I admit, like, every day is not comfortable to stick my neck out. You take your opportunity, and when things go wrong, quite honestly, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah.
Am I going to still have a job? That's just the reality. I think everybody may have faced that at some point, but I think you do have to say, listen, this is the right thing, and this is, how we should go about it. Now, there are a lot of forces at play in any company, so whether that ends up coming to pass or not, but I think you can at least feel good about the fact that you have put something forward, you've done the research, that you can back up whatever that is, and if it doesn't go the way that you wanted it, it's like, okay, well, let's get on board with whatever else is going to happen, because something that Paige said, which was another question that you had, was about opportunity. Like, what would you tell some of the other people, like younger people in the organization? And I always looked at it, and even from my own career, was that, what's the opportunity? Like, I don't want to complain about, like, oh my God, it's awful. I can go home and complain to my husband about that. But, it's like, when I look at it, I have to just keep moving forward and say, okay, this is a really exciting time. And that's what I tell, there are, sort of people entry level coming to the organization from all over the organization. And they come and they say, oh, Monica, you've been at Bloomberg so long. What can you tell me about, being here, or your career, or what should I be doing, or whatever? And I just look at them and I was like, this is such an exciting time for you all. I have a son who's 21, and to me, I'm like, this is exciting. Like, the world's exciting, technology, there's everything that's exciting. So don't, don't come, you're gonna have moments, but don't come and look at it as like a challenge and a problem and and any of that. It's like, use whatever is out in the world and think about what the opportunity is, and look at the excitement of what you could be doing.
Yeah, what I love about it, it's just like a subtle, really critical kind of reframe on a word choice, right? Don't call it a problem, call it a challenge. Call it an opportunity, and like the difference that can make. Liz, I'd love to hear a bit from you on like where you see, what are some things that your organization and you are helping to push forward in terms of the women's agenda at your work right now?
Well, I'll give you an example of a project. Yeah. My projects don't face inside IBM as much as they face outside. So I'll give you an example of one coming up, which is actually a really good sort of good one for this panel, which is the Masters.
Yeah.
Right. The Masters is, since 1934 has been this iconic golf tournament, and it's just the bastion of sort of like old boy networkdom, right? And so, women weren't members at the club, women didn't set foot there, and, that's gradually changed. To some extent, there's still quite a bit more work to do, but they made this announcement last year that they're having the women's amateur tournament right before the Masters tournament, and the women are going to play a round of golf, the final round of the amateur tournament on the course before the Masters even starts. Now, you might say, oh, well, that's just, but that's huge for them.
Yeah.
That is a major step forward. So, we as partners with them for over 20 years are, number one, delighted that they're doing it. But number two, trying to figure out, okay, how can we help them to embrace sort of a broader audience, get women excited, invite them into sort of this event and sort of open their culture? And how can we make it easy for women to engage, right? And so what you were saying before is, about challenges, what I think about is less of the how than sort of the what. What is the higher level purpose? And, there's a lot of different ways we can get there. And so it's the how, against the higher level purpose that we're trying to sort of figure out right now. So how do we engage women? How do we engage them in, a technology conversation? How do we engage emerging leaders? How do we get people who wouldn't sit and watch golf all weekend to be interested enough to sort of engage with sort of an event that really transcends the actual play that's happening, right?
Awesome. I like that it could seem small, but really when we're talking about innovation, it's not like, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to do this one small thing that has actually really significant changes. I love that. Thank you. Paige, I'd love if you could talk a little bit just about your own personal journey and your rise in leadership, and what have you had to overcome as you're growing in leadership and becoming a more prominent leader in your organization?
Sure. I am a big fan of the jungle gym is the new career path, not the ladder. And when I say new, I feel like this has been going on for a long time, but maybe people didn't talk about it. So I've been involved in book publishing, magazine publishing, the first internet boom, and then I made a really conscious decision to go full-time as a mom. And it wasn't even like leaning back or leaning out or whatever the opposite of leaning in is. It was like I was like in a bunker, and I was like I totally was disconnected from the industry for 5.5 years. And regardless of, okay, that was my personal moment where I was changing my focus, but all of us now have those things happening. Maybe we always did, but I think now it feels like, parents, either mom or dad or both moms or both, whatever the mix is, somebody may choose one path that's a little bit different than the other, or you might both be working full-time while you're both full-time parents, or you might be someone who just really wants to travel with their friends more often. Like that could be like a really important personal passion. You might have aging parents. You might just be really interested in getting like a degree that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your day job. Like all of us have these things that make us very complex, like career pathers. And for me, that coming back into the workforce was by far the hardest thing I've ever done, because I literally bowed out when social media became a thing. And that was a little hard to catch up to speed on. So I actually, the way I conquered this was I went through the nonprofit route. So nonprofits are looking for people who are smart, people who are driven, people who will do everything. And so I helped launch a children's museum. So it felt like it had something to do with me. It was about an experience with a brand. And from there, I ended up finding this path of content. And I've been so lucky to work in 2 very, very large corporations that see the whole person They don't just see, you're here and you need to do FaceTime and you need to climb this ladder a certain way. I think it goes back to we all in our companies, like you're saying, we need to speak to our customers the way that they expect to be spoken to, and I think our employees are part of that. So that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I encourage young people of any gender, and I also think it's a topic for everybody, is how do you find people that can not just mentor you, but can advocate on your behalf so that it's beyond what your current role is. So sometimes, I've had to be, what I like to say is quite scrappy to show that I've had a lot of experience that's quite relevant to what I do now, but my resume may not show that. So let me get to know someone, let them get to know me, and let me ask them pointedly, will you advocate for me? And that's a really scary thing to ask someone. You have to know them pretty well. But will you advocate for me, I think, is a really important thing for all of us, because mentors are like one relationship. And I actually have mentors that are all different ages and levels. So one of my favorite mentors right now is at MetLife. She's about 15 years younger than I am. She has a different level, more junior role, and she gives me such honest feedback. And I love to ask her, as a mentor, what could I have done differently in that meeting? Am I making this understandable for everyone? And then I have mentors that, he was my first boss at Wired Magazine before it was part of Condé Nast, and he's my first text if I have something I'm working through. And then I have another mentor from JP Morgan Chase that is so high up the food chain, I still can't believe he remembers me, but he's pushing me. He's pushing me to go bigger, because he has that perspective. But these are different than advocates, or what I guess some people call champions in the workplace. And I think as we all want to be seen authentically for what we can actually do, finding environments where that is encouraged, I think, is really important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It reminds me, one of the things that when I work with individual clients, I talk to them sometimes about who's your board of directors, right? Who's your personal, who's on your team? Who are you going to call on when you need advice or mentorship or, strategic questions, and really kind of figuring out who is that list of people. For me, my mom's on there, but, really being able to identify and have that, and because we really all need allies, especially now. And I know this is one of the things that you and I talked about of how do you not only get your ideas out, but how do you make sure, what kind of support do you need from higher ups? And I know if you want to talk a bit about that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, it's as much, managing up as managing your team. But I think it's also managing, I would say up, but sort of out, because I think there are people, in different parts of the organization who, while they may not have direct influence over the thing you're doing at the moment, they are at that level of the organization where they speak to other people at that level of the organization. And it's always helpful that you have them, either advocating this to say things like, yeah, they do really great work, or I recognize whatever, or you should really talk to, Paige or Liz about this, or whatever it is. Yeah. So I think that that's how I have approached it. Is it's not necessarily, again, while managing up is important, I say it's managing out. I cannot say that I'm great at the up part.
Yeah.
I'm probably better at managing out, so more of the senior leaders outside of my direct line.
Yeah.
I probably need to get better at the other part, but I think that other part has been helpful for me in terms of people who are still in those rooms and can either advocate or have something positive to say about the work that we are doing.
Yeah.
That can be recognized by a certain level of the organization.
Yeah. So much of it here is none of this can be done alone, right? We are in a network of people and support up, above, around all of that. I love that. Elizabeth, I'm wondering, this is just for my own sort of curiosity, do you think there's a difference between how men and women lead? If so, what you say, and will say this is a bit generalization, there's all sorts of nuances, but do you think there's something unique that women bring to the table?
Well, so I can answer this, and then there's going to be a million exceptions. to
Sure,
it,
yeah, of
right?
course.
And so what I will say is I think there's a collaborative spirit that's not unique to women,
Yeah.
but that seems to be a strength of women, right? And so for me, one of the challenges that as working at a large company is there are a lot of people who are doing things that are related to what I'm doing, or who are, pushing out messages that are very closely related to what I'm trying to communicate, that I have to go find, right? Because it's not always obvious where they are when you're working in a company that size. And I've found great collaborators of, all shapes, sizes, everything. But I will say that I do believe it's a strength of women.
Yeah. Beautiful. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I probably agree. I didn't think about it that
Yeah.
way, but now that you say that, I probably agree with that. That I guess that is somewhat of a nature, and like
Yeah.
she said, I'm sure there are always exceptions because sort of my previous manager, I think he was somebody who I felt was a good collaborator. But I think you're right. I mean, you end up in many rooms, or I have, where it's a fully male room, so no one who looks like me at all, but it's sort of like you become the voice of like, oh, all right, you know what, maybe we should think about this, or so the collaboration and bringing that we should collaborate better on whatever that is.
Yeah. I'll say one other thing too, related to your story about leaving the workforce and coming back into the workforce, is I think having, I'm a parent on your resume is a huge plus, right? I mean, it adds, you would expect, or not you would expect, but, as a parent, you really have to learn the art of flexibility, of the ability to react, on a dime, right? The ability to listen. Those are all
Problem
skills.
solve.
Yes, those are all skills that are huge anywhere, and it's not unique to parents. But when you leave the workforce and you come back, you've been learning that whole time.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. I think it's interesting. I just think this question of gender and collaboration, I feel like for me it's more just that we're evolving to having to be so collaborative in our workplaces that I think people are adopting it quickly.
Yeah.
And so I might be lucky where I am right now because we have a lot of stakeholders of all shapes and sizes, like you said, and I think I may have found just as many people that don't want to collaborate who are women than men.
Yeah.
That's the negative.
Yeah.
The positive is
We're shifting in that direction.
that it's shifting. I think what you said about managing out, there was a saying sort of at one of my companies that I've been with that your job is really to collaborate, and then get it done.
Yeah.
And that nuance is very challenging because I have also fallen into the rabbit hole of I'm trying to collaborate so much that apparently I can't get it done. And that's a real challenge. So I'm finding that I'm needing to adopt certain more like structured roles. Like, okay, this is a meeting that I am running. I am asking you all here to do X. When we leave, we're trying to solve Y. In the end, we are not the decision makers. I will be recommending something to so-and-so who is.
Yeah.
And like, if I'm super clear and I actually articulate that at the beginning of a meeting, it actually helps me stay on track so that because I'm naturally wanting to, tell me more what you think should happen.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very curious about people's motivations and thinking. And so I have to stop myself and remember my job is to get it done.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a challenge, I think, today in our environments.
Yeah. So selling ideas in and getting it done, two very different things. I would love to just sort of zoom out a little and think about the future, right? We have a room full of very impressive men and women here, and it's not women solving one thing, men solving the other. It's how do we work together and what needs to happen. So, Monica, I'd love to hear a bit about like what's critical right now and how we support more people in the organization, more diversity of humans, of ideas, all of that. What needs to happen?
I think we just have to keep listening, right? It's depending on where you are in the, in your career, you're going to have people who are, coming in and, a new generation of ideas and thoughts and whatever. And I think you have to listen. And I find that, they're coming, young people are coming in with new ideas to the organization that sometimes we've done already, but they want to be heard. And so we try to do that and then, give some guidance as to like why that may or may not work. But I think it's valid. I mean, we're living in a time where technology is moving very quickly. Ideas are moving very quickly. Social media has changed the landscape of, it all. So we cannot be in sort of a bubble of like, okay, this is the way we've done it and we can't do it any other way or whatever. But it is that balance of, okay, well, let's listen to some of the ideas, but listen, we got to get it done. So let's do that. So I think it's very much a balance of like, yep, let's, bring along the new ideas and the fresh things that are coming in. There's a point of we have the experience of knowing like what probably will and will not work, but let's try a couple of things and keep going. The one thing I do appreciate about Bloomberg, I mean, and I learned this like very early on in my career, that even as a journalist, that Mike Bloomberg he was very much about go and do it, and we'll iterate, we'll fix it later.
Yeah.
But take that thing out and let's see what the customers think about it or whatever it is. And so I find myself very much in my own role doing that now.
Yeah.
It's sort of my teams they're like sort of we're working on something or whatever. I was like, just do it, test it. And let's see what happens. And we can test it with a small group and we can expand it or whatever it is, but let's do it, because if not, then we're paralyzed until we get to the perfect thing.
Yeah.
That may never come.
Yeah.
So let's just, go ahead and iterate. So it is really funny. I mean, I think that's why I went to work at Bloomberg so many years ago. So I'm definitely dating myself now. But when I went, I was leaving, I was in the sort of media industry, traditional media industry. I'd worked in radio for a fair amount of time, television and then radio. And a friend of mine called and said, you need to go check this place out. This guy, Mike Bloomberg, because my friend was in the bond industry and had worked with Bloomberg, the company, on the bond side, said, this guy, Mike Bloomberg, I'm telling you, he's a visionary, you need to go. And at the time, I was freelancing, and I was like, okay, so a couple of other people who I knew in the industry were going, and so sent resume along, and I was grateful for the job, but on the other side, they were grateful to hire me because they were starting this radio station in New York City, and they needed people who had experience. And he felt like, well, this is a startup. I'm just grateful that you're coming to actually work for something that's not proven. I'm like, okay, great. Well, here I am.
Wow.
And but what I saw when I got there was really, truly amazing. So you come from traditional. He had already laid the groundwork and said, we will not do any tape in this newsroom. It will be all digital. We were testing, and again, like the startup, which I'm sure many of you all are either have been or familiar with, it was very much a startup then. We were testing technology where you were recording right into a PC. So, of course, now I'm sure you all you're like, oh my God, that's like old news. But at the time, it was not. We were testing several different technologies because the mandate was there will be no tape in this newsroom. So imagine that I had to go and now tell Mike Bloomberg, but if you want commercials, Mike, we have to take reel-to-reels. And he was like, I don't care. I just don't want to see it. So we had to build it's a funny story, but we had to go and build like a reel-to-reel with a cover so that he wouldn't see the tape. But again, it was hilarious, but ahead of the time, because you worked at a place where it was like they were still using cart machines, and now I come to a place where it was like there will be none of that. It will be all digital. like we're going to do this television screen that's going to have like content all over and on the bottom, and and at the time that wasn't being done. And so that's what I really appreciated. I got so excited to be there because I was like, oh my God, this guy is a visionary. And now, I mean, soon after that, how many years later did you see television become this sort of information screen where you had all sorts of stuff on the information? And I think, well, oh my God, like no one was doing that before he was, doing that. So some of those lessons learned like very early on about just do it, go to market, iterate, figure it out, and
cover
then
it up.
cover it up,
Cover it up, yeah.
but
Keep going.
but keep going,
Yeah.
right? And then if it doesn't work, all right, well, just move on, but take a risk and see what happens. So I think the future is very much like that. It's like we still just cannot get paralyzed by whatever is coming. Like I think we have to try it in some way, take a bit of a risk, and then iterate on whatever that is and sort of keep moving.
I love it. Thank you. I'm eyeing the clock and just trying to ignore it, wishing I could ask you guys like 100 more questions and raise it, but we are out of time. Thank you all so much for coming and sharing your stories and your ideas. We're so grateful to have you. So.
Thank you.